it seems that the Prime Minister is not very happy with citizens who can think for themselves and who can express what they think. Now, if that is the case, if that were the case, that is unfortunate. It is likely, I'm saying only likely, not certain, that there might be a regime change in Israel. Point number one. Point number two, there may be a modest regime change in Washington. If Trump loses the midterms, well, then he can be lame duck president. I agree with you and with Rahul Gandhi that hugging is not a, it cannot replace traditional serious diplomacy.
Fabian sir, thank you so much for joining us once again this week. And like always, we have a lot of ground to cover. Let's start with India. Of course, India celebrated its 80th Independence Day. The Prime Minister addressing the nation from the ramparts of the Red Fort. Before I come to what he said in this speech, one of the talking points was the singing of the Vande Mataram in its entirety. The full 6-stanza version was sung from the Red Fort for the first time. And this comes after the Parliament passed a bill which gave Vande Mataram the same legal status as the national anthem of India. How do you see this, sir?
Thank you. Now, let us start with the matter which you mentioned, Vande Mataram. Well, my position is that since it is the law that Vande Mataram should be given the same status as the national anthem, well, that law should be, the citizen has two choices. One is to obey the law. The other is disobey the law and face the consequences. Consequences, as you know, can be incarceration or fine or whatever it be. There is no other choice. But at the same time, it is necessary to dig a little into history of Vande Mataram. Now, that was in the, what shall I say, written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee in his famous book, Anand Mat. Now, in Anand Mat, there is a leader of a band of sannyasi soldiers. His name is Satyananda. Satyananda. And they were fighting the Muslim forces and their British officers. And they won the war. And naturally, Satyanand wanted to continue. Then what happened is that a figure with a divine voice instructs him to stop fighting. So Satyananda says, can't stop unless the Hindu dominion is established. The divine voice says, there are no foes, F-O-E-S, enemies now. The English are friends, our friends, as well as rulers. And no one can defeat them in battle. So that was sometime in the 19th century. Fast forward, October 1939, Second World War had started. Savarkar meets the Viceroy, and the Viceroy sends a message to the Secretary of State in London. The Viceroy says, and I'm quoting, Savarkar says the interests of the British of Britain and Hindus have never been as aligned with each other as they are now. So, the divine voice that Satyananda heard, well, it continues to be heeded by Savarkar. How many years later? You can figure out. Almost more than 50 years. So that is that, the background of Vande Mataram. And also in 1937, it was decided by the Congress Working Committee, after consulting Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi, Nehru, and others also were there, to recite only the first four stanzas of Vande Mataram. Why? Because the later stanzas have a religious significance, speaks of Durga, Devi, and all that sort of thing. So the Congress thought it was appropriate to have only the first four stanzas. Now, I still believe that that is the sensible, correct position for India. Because in this context, you should also bear in mind that the Prime Minister did not say Jai Hind, you see, at the Red Fort. He said Jai Bharat. Now, I have no quarrel with Jai Bharat, but let me remind all of our friends that the Jai Hind was very, very popular with Subhash Chandra Bose, whose Azad Hind Fauj, Indian National Army, had used it. Why? Because it includes everyone, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Jain, whatever you mean. You know what I mean? So that is what the background is. So the question is whether we should choose for our national anthem words which every Indian is comfortable with, or we should choose words which not every Indian is comfortable with. Now, I have given you my answer, but I repeat, if you are a citizen, you have to abide by the law, but you also have the choice to disobey the law and face the consequences. But you cannot, you can even go to the court, but as of, depending on the situation, you have to do one of the two.
Let's come to what the Prime Minister said in his speech. And I think the one big sort of highlight that is now being talked about is Dimaagi Naxal. The Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, said there's a need to identify and isolate these Dimaagi Naxals. And of course, the context wasn't lost on anyone, but do you think it suits the Prime Minister to make such a comment on Independence Day from the ramparts of the Red Fort?
Well, let me put it this way. The Independence Day is a day we should always uphold our unity. Unity as Indian citizens, cutting across political divide, religious divide, linguistic divide, ethnic divide, or every divide. Obviously, we expect the Prime Minister also to use such words that will promote such unity. Now, it is evident that these two words which you mentioned have not promoted such unity. Now, second part is that who are these, Naxalites, Dimaagi Naxalites? Well, he has not taken the trouble to identify them, but critics have pointed out that it seems that the Prime Minister is not very happy with citizens who can think for themselves and who can express what they think. Now, if that is the case, if that were the case, that is unfortunate. India's timeless values include freedom of expression and freedom of thinking. So, my view is that on the whole, I wish he had not used it, but at the same time, I'm open to listen to his explanation, not by explanation by others, And if he has a point, well, let us listen. If there were a press conference, he could have been asked.
But you do think that it was improper in a way on the part of the Prime Minister to make such a comment? Is that something that you agree with?
I'm saying that we expect the Prime Minister to use words which promote unity and do not, sort of uh, promote disunity. Now, it is for you to decide whether this has promoted unity or disunity.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Let's move on to another topic that is being spoken about here in India is the students' protest in Jharkhand. Effectively, it is all set to come to an end as of now while we are recording this video after the Jharkhand government has agreed to cancel the recruitment exams over irregularities. The student leader, Devendra Mathur, who was at the face, who's at the face of this movement, he has ended his hunger strike. You see this as a positive development that is coming the second time in 2 months that a government has to now concede to what the youngsters are saying and more importantly listen to their grievance.
Good. Now, both what the central government did in the case of Jantar Mandir, and what the Jharkhand government has done now remind me of the Bourbon. They, of Louis the 14th. The Bourbon ruled France before the French Revolution. Now they were restored in 1815 after the defeat of Napoleon. And Talleyrand, very clever man, who held high office under the Bourbons, under Napoleon, and again under the Bourbon. Look at his navigational capabilities. He said about the Bourbons that they have learned nothing, they have forgotten nothing, meaning they cannot learn from their past or from their present, nor can they forget the dogmas which they held, meaning they continue to hold on to the dogma of divine right. Now, it's a bit like that because the central government, after the farmers' agitation, when they withdrew the bill, after how long, you can tell me, the central government could have, you know, done it much earlier, isn't it? It need not have waited for so many days. And the same thing applies to Jharkhand government. It also could have acted much, much earlier. But let me point out what is fascinating is that in the case of the Jharkhand agitation, the ABVP, the students' union associated with the BJP, was very active. Whereas Janta Mandir, they were not. Or even if they were present, it was for a different purpose. That's again noteworthy. But first point I want to make is that in a democracy, it is incumbent on the part of the executive at the union level or at the state level to listen to the citizens, whether they are old or whether they are young. And it is so heartening to see the youth of India rising up and their voice being heard. But I don't think it's the end of the story. You know that today we read about NET. The question papers were badly drafted. There were mistakes in English and commerce and other papers. Now, let me tell you, we have to ask a fundamental question. Why is it happening? Now, of course, it needs investigation, but my preliminary opinion is that it may be happening because wrong people have been appointed to such positions. Appointments have been made not based on their qualifications per se, but based on their connections. So we, the government and the citizens, have to sit down quietly, calmly, and correct the mistakes. And it is for the government to take the lead and to make sure that the citizens understand that the government has heard and the government is no longer deaf.
Let's move on to some of the international happenings, starting with, of course, Donald Trump, the American president. He is now threatened to bomb Oman if it gets in the way of ending the Iran war. Now, of course, this is something that we talk about every week. There's no end to the war in sight at the moment, but threatening Oman, which is not a direct party as far as I understand in this war. Can you put this in perspective for us?
See, what was happening was that Iran and Oman were negotiating about having an arrangement for smooth passage across the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, Washington was in touch with Oman because you know that Oman had mediated between Washington and Tehran before this war started. Now, somehow, Trump got the impression that after the conclusion of the negotiations between Oman and Iran, the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened by Iran. But Iran had made it very clear that these are technical negotiations and the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened only after President Trump delivers on the obligations he accepted in this memorandum of understanding he signed with much fanfare on the 17th of June at the Versailles Palace, as we all know. Now, Trump violated the many clauses in the memorandum of understanding in regard to removal of the blockade, in regard to the revoking of the sanctions on the sale of Iranian oil, and also release partial or complete of frozen assets belonging to Iran. He violated, and then he went on using abusive language with regard to Iran. So that is why the Strait of Hormuz is not open. And he also said that Iran has the option to surrender. Now, what Trump should understand is that Iran is defiant, it is convinced that it can withstand any resumption of attack by Trump. So, the goal is in the ball is in Trump's court. The football, and it is for him to kick it instead of going on accusing. And one more thing, Trump and Netanyahu started with the idea of regime change. No regime change in Iran. It is likely, I'm saying only likely, not certain, that there might be a regime change in Israel. Point number one. Point number two, there may be a modest regime change in Washington. If Trump loses the midterms, well, then he can be lame duck president. So, you should ask yourself, where is the regime change likely to happen?
Okay, that's a very interesting point that you've mentioned about regime change. Speaking of Trump, there's another development that has just happened overnight. The Trump administration, while renewing to push for the Save America Act, they have cited India's example. They've cited India's Chief Election Commissioner, Ganesh Kumar. They've praised India's voter ID system, and this comes after CC Ganesh Kumar met the US Ambassador Sergio Gore, and he, in fact, he said that what India does in its electoral system is something that America should aim for. Now, given that there are questions about how fair and free India's electoral process is, in that light, how do you see the American president's remarks, or do you think it is just meant for his domestic audience in America itself and not a larger point that he's trying to make?
Okay, let's put again it into context. Ambassador Gore is very, very active. He is meeting so many Indian leaders and office holders. In fact, I think I had said earlier, he is more than an ambassador. At times, he becomes vice regal. Well, that apart, it is my guess that it is Ambassador Gore who prompted President Trump to say what he said. Now, coming to the substance, we all know with this process called SIR, well, so many lakhs of voters have been deprived of their vote. It is quite possible, and I agree that it was necessary to revise, and people who are dead, their name should not be there. People who have migrated from city A to city B, their name should not be there. But we also know that apart from such corrections, much wrong deletions, many wrong deletions have happened. And therefore, I think President Trump is getting slightly mixed up about the whole thing. But as you said, for his domestic audience, it makes sense to say that because, he is making the point that the American system is needs correction.
Let's move on to something that we discussed in the last episode, and that is the Mecca Pact. It's, of course, the agreement that came in, which is also being called as the Islamic NATO. One of the factors that has now come in as the world dissects this Islamic NATO is the absence of Egypt from this pact. Some say that there is perhaps an India connection to it. Some say that Egypt is still weighing its options and how it wants to go about it. What is your sense of Egypt's absence, and more importantly, how should India see this going forward?
Of course, Islamic NATO is what shall I say? That phrase has been coined by some commentators. The three countries which have signed have not used that expression. But we should take note of the fact that the pact was signed in Mecca, the holy city of Islam, and not in Riyadh, the capital. So there is a certain Islamic character to it, and historically speaking, it reminds me of the Holy Alliance of 1815 between Tsarist Russia, Prussian monarchy, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, well, in a manner of speaking, because, Napoleon had almost dismantled it, but Austro-Hungarian Empire was there. You see? Now, why do you import religion into all this? Doesn't make any sense. Now, that apart, coming to Egypt, I doubt whether Egypt's calculations include any likelihood of India's getting upset if Egypt joins the pact. It is possible, but not probable. My view is that, you see, Egypt is heavily dependent on the United States. And therefore, Egypt wouldn't like to be seen as joining any pact targeted against Israel. That's point number one. Second point is that, Trump has, what shall I say, upheld the pact. He said it's a very good thing. But let's just look at it critically. Above all, it's an act of no confidence on the part of these three powers in the ability or willingness, or both, of the United States to give protection to the GCC countries. Against whom? Primarily against Israel. Because historically, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have been very close to each other, but they signed a bilateral treaty in September last year. Why? After Israel attacked Qatar. And Qatar had believed, with an American base, nobody will attack them. Within 10 days of that attack, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed that treaty. Now, in a manner of speaking, Turkey has joined it. Now, it is possible that Egypt also might join it. Possible. But Egypt is hedging. As regards India, let me put it this way. I don't think we should be unduly worried about it, except that, you see, for Saudi Arabia, it is for protection against Israel. Because Saudi Arabia doesn't expect Turkey to come to its rescue if America restarts a war and Iran starts shelling missiles or drones. No, Saudi Arabia doesn't expect. Saudi Arabia is hoping and praying that Trump will not do the foolish thing. As regards Pakistan, again, it's not going to rush to Saudi Arabia's defense if Iran attacks. Iran attacks because America attacks. You see, so what is required, and this is what India should understand, is a security system for the whole region of West Asia, which includes GCC, Iraq, Yemen, Iran, and even Israel. That is what is required. Now, what is the long-term project? Meanwhile, India should strengthen its defense arrangements with the GCC countries by way of training, giving technology, giving arms, and otherwise.
Right. From West Asia, let's come to our neighborhood. There's talk of the Bangladesh Prime Minister Tariq Rahman visiting India, but reports suggest there are two conditions that Dhaka has put. The Bangladeshi Foreign Ministry said that the two countries have been in contact for the last several weeks, but they have clearly stated two conditions for this visit of the Bangladeshi Prime Minister to go through. And I'm quoting from the statement of the Foreign Ministry spokesperson of Bangladesh. He said, "To this end, we have requested the Indian authorities to expeditiously act on our request to extradite Sheikh Hasina and other fugitive criminals and to hand over to Bangladesh the accused killers of Shahid Sharif Osman Hadi in compliance with our bilateral extradition treaty." That is what the Bangladesh Foreign Ministry spokesperson has said. And as far as I believe, there's been no official response from India just yet. But how do you see this, sir? What do you think India should do? Because this is a topic that has often come up in the last couple of years after Sheikh Hasina was overthrown. How do you see this? What should India do?
Thank you. Well, my view is and has been all along that while it was correct to have given asylum to Sheikh Hasina in August of that year, 5th of August, it was not very, what shall I say, it didn't show India did not show mature judgment by not finding her another place, to have asylum. And now India is painting itself into a corner in this matter because, Bangladesh has been irritated because of the press conference which Sheikh Hasina gave. Well, that press conference had two parts to it. She said that she would go back in December, and then she said that she would go back and restore democracy there. Now, the first part is okay, but to speak of restoring democracy there, well, naturally, Bangladesh got very upset. And now I hear that some of our people are saying, it came in the papers, that there is a judicial process to be gone through, and it will be the court that will decide whether and when Sheikh Hasina should be sent back. I think this is very, very unnecessary and dangerous because there is a mutual extradition treaty between Bangladesh and India signed in 2013. Just follow the treaty. And the treaty makes it incumbent on India to extradite to Bangladesh any national against whom there is a court ruling which is more than 1 year's imprisonment. So India should do that instead of going round and round. And let's hope India will do it. Otherwise, the cost will be heavy. India's relations with Bangladesh will be impaired. And there I want to make one point. Both India and Bangladesh should recognize that good bilateral relations between them are of utmost importance to both of them. It's not that, it's important for India alone, no. Nor that it is important for Bangladesh alone, no. It is important for both, and both should show maturity. And as regards the invitation to Prime Minister, well, MEA could have acted with more imagination. There could have been one single invitation where he is invited for a bilateral visit and also to take part in the BRICS as the head of the BIMSTEC. Because, Bangladesh has said, that this invitation as head of the BIMSTEC and all that. Now, these are minor matters which a good protocol should be able to take care of. And, of course, the territorial division.
Right. And my final question, coming back to India, it's something that is connected to India's foreign policy, and it became a huge political issue in India. That's the leader of opposition, Rahul Gandhi, last week. While speaking at an event, he was trying to criticize the government on this huglomacy style of foreign policy that the Prime Minister has had, where he goes about hugging foreign leaders. And Rahul Gandhi did that. He was showing how the Prime Minister just goes about hugging foreign leaders, and it doesn't quite address much of the substance. Now, and of course the government and the people within the ruling party called out the leader of opposition, saying he was childish. But do you think beyond a point the government needs to stop being a little overtly sensitive about such matters? Because the larger point that is being made by the critics is that the Prime Minister has made this into a personalized style of diplomacy where he goes about hugging foreign leaders.
Well, I'll give you a short answer. Rahul Gandhi himself went and hugged Prime Minister Modi. You remember? Okay. So that's point number one. Point number two is that I don't think Prime Minister Modi hugged President Trump this time. So there is less hugging going on. Point number three, it is very correct to say that hugging cannot replace traditional diplomacy. When leaders meet, they should have proper, detailed, as time permits, conversation. And whether that is taking place or not is difficult for me to say because, when I was there, when the Prime Minister or the Foreign Minister met other leaders, there was always somebody, either the ambassador or somebody else, to take notes. And in fact, Jawaharlal Nehru had a different practice. He met Bulganin in Moscow in 1955 when they discussed the Security Council permanent membership for India. Nehru, on his return, he dictated a note. Now, I do not know whether Prime Minister Modi is following that practice. And so, it is difficult for me to answer that question. But I agree with you and with Rahul Gandhi that hugging is not it cannot replace traditional, serious diplomacy.
All right. On that note, Ambassador KP Fabian, sir, thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking with us. Thank you, sir.